call to order the meeting of the Westford School Committee on July 12th. First thing we're going to do, and we have maybe somebody from the public here, so the first thing we're going to do is get to executive session. It should be pretty brief, but I will warn you that we're using the same Zoom link to do that. So we are going to, everyone who just came in, who's not a school committee member, we're going to politely and courteously eject you from the meeting and just check back in a little bit. I mean, you can almost check back in right away and you'll just be in the waiting room while we are in executive session. So that's how we're going to do this today. I don't see Sean coming in. So Valerie, do you want to do the motion to adjourn?
Yep, motion to adjourn to executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, and the committee will reconvene to open session.
Second.
And this will be a roll call voice vote. Gloria?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That adjourns us to executive session. And apologies to everyone who's getting booted, but come back in a few minutes. And I think executive session. We're now back in public session. For those who are rejoining us, welcome. And we are at the new business portion on our agenda. And we're going to have a vote to release executive meeting minutes from July 23rd of 2018. Do I have a motion?
Do you need to unmute people if they've been muted?
Yep. So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have our second. And just for those who aren't aware, these are minutes dealing with a superintendent salary increase. Our outgoing superintendent, through the mass teacher retirement system, they're processing his benefits and request documentation having to do with salary increases if they meet certain thresholds. And these minutes in particular, where we voted an increase, did meet those thresholds. And so as far as providing documentation, we need to release those minutes, make them available to the mass teacher retirement system. And that's what this vote will be for. Any questions, conversation? Hearing none, I will take the vote. Valerie?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. That's 6 unanimous in favor of releasing those minutes. Thank you guys for that. Kind of a procedural thing that normally we don't have to do, but I'm glad everyone was able to come together and we could do that and get that retirement benefit process moving along. The other thing that we want to talk about while we're here, it did come to our attention that there have been changes in recommendations, either from DESE or the governor, as we've gone along. As we know, these changes have happened for the last year as we've gone along with COVID. And typically we've had the opportunity as a committee to come together, talk about them with the administration, talk about the impacts. And we realized that there were changes to guidance and recommendations in the past month that, while not impacting us in the fall per se, are impacting our students and our staff in the extended school year program this summer. And so while we were coming together, it felt like a good time just to get an update on that, since we have been using these meetings as a way of communicating those updates to the public and to the committee itself. And so I really appreciate Dr. Chu, Dr. Cleary being able to come today and just kind of give us the state of where all those recommendations are at, because they don't all come aligned, and they have been coming at different intervals, and there have been changes that have had an impact. So I guess I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Chu, if you have, if you want to give us just kind of where we're at with the guidance and how it's affecting the extended school year program.
So with the end of the typical school year, the Department of Education had changed their mandates. And so they said that they were recommending that schools continue to follow the same guidance that they used in the spring if they chose throughout the summer. With the mask mandate being lifted in the state specifically, and in Westford, in working with our Department of Health, we continued to encourage students who are participating in the ESY, the extended school year program, that indoor mask wearing, if they haven't been vaccinated, for anybody who hadn't been vaccinated, which would be, children under 12, that we were recommending that, and we've continued to recommend that. However, we're not mandating it for a reason, because the Department of Education is not mandating it, the state is not mandating it, and so while we're encouraging people who have not been vaccinated to continue to wear masks while indoors, we're in a position where we can't really mandate that, as there's no way to enforce that. specifically. If someone chose not to wear a mask, there wouldn't be a way for us to enforce that. And another issue that, so what has happened was that they, in opening up the extended school year, they were communicating with families in terms of what the program would be like. And so I do know that a couple of parents had reached out because they were concerned when the program started, when they learned that masks were not being mandated for all children. And so there were some concerns. We've also had some concerns from families about mandating masks for children during the summer months as well too, which really leads us to where we're following the guidance from the Department of Education in terms of recommending it. We're following the guidance from the CDC in terms of recommending it, and we're following the guidance from the state in terms of recommending it. But there are no mask mandates per se at this time. So I don't know if if that explains kind of where we're at. Did I miss anything, Dr. Cleary?
Nope.
Thank you for that. Comments or questions from the committee? Catherine?
I would just like to, I suppose, maybe clarify. I think that, was really good. I think that the timing, like you said, Dr. Chu, it was all kind of towards the end of the school year, and what we thought was one kind of some guidance still remaining kind of seemed to shift in just that kind of cracks. And so I know, as we said, some parents kind of felt that they only found out that communication on day one. So there was maybe kind of we might have dropped the ball on getting that information out to parents just a little bit sooner. But I believe we're working with those, any of those families who might have had an issue with that. But I just am wondering if we're following all these guidelines. Our previous year, from what I can remember, we kind of cherry picked a little bit, and kind of Westford created our own year of what we were doing between following DESI guidelines and CDC guidelines. So I'm just wondering, is this then, if we're going to stick with following DESI guidelines, is that going to lead us into the fall that we are just kind of sticking? So I think it's more, I'm just commenting that, I just want for parents to be clear, or, for us all to be clear that we're on the same page in terms of come the fall, because I know we'll probably have to have this discussion again. That are we picking and choosing again what Westford wants to do, CDC versus DESI, or kind of that we as a district will discuss ourselves.
If I could respond, I think an important clarification that would be helpful for everybody is that we weren't. You used the word cherry picking, and we weren't cherry picking DESI guidelines. The Department of Education gave us specific options in terms of the 3 different plans that we were mandated to create, and gave the school committee options as to which one of the plans initially that we would be operating with, and we chose to go with the hybrid. But all of the safety expectations and all of the safety protocols and all of those mandates, those were required, and we followed all of those in terms of mask usage, in terms of distancing. We started the conversation in the summer with families, and we were talking about a 3-foot distance, and the families in Westford responded very clearly to that concern that DESI was suggesting 3 foot of distance would be safe, whereas CDC was saying 6 feet. But DESI also really did speak to that, because what they said was that if you at that moment in time, they were allowing schools to make that decision between whether 3 foot or 6 foot of distancing based on the hybrid model or not having the hybrid model. So there was still some flexibility that they were providing us, if that makes sense. But it was still very clear in what their expectations were, and that's been the change. That's also what changed when they shifted to have all of the schools go to a full return in the first place. What they started doing was they actually started taking away the options that school districts had.
Oh, we
but I just
actually
wanted to
seem to go
clarify.
more stricter than, because I know DESE in their guidelines for last fall had said, you know, kids, I was a K in first grade, didn't need to be masked from what I read over the last few days. And also they were given guidelines for lunches, which we chose not to do lunches and stuff. So I think Westford seemed to kind of, you know, based on families. So what I mean is, as a district, we decided what our
You're
guidelines
right.
were.
Good point about initially there was different guidance in terms of the youngest students, and we chose to expect all of our students to wear the masks at first. I see your point there. Yeah, that was something that we had talked about. But yeah, I understand.
And if I think to clarify and summarize what you're saying, Catherine, is that, and what Dr. Chu is saying, we will follow required guidelines for safety, but when given choices, we will continue to look at what makes sense for Westford schools. And, when there's suggestions or options available, we will use that flexibility to do what's right for our students and our staff and our schools going forward. And we'll see how much flexibility. There may not be much option or less option in the fall than there was in the past year, just because things might be a little more certain. Gloria, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I think my comment was very similar to what you were just saying, Chris, that, there were certain places where we did have some flexibility to adjust based on local conditions. And I think one of those areas was the 3 feet versus 6 feet. While there were some families who were advocating for the 3 and a full return, a majority of families were not comfortable with a 3-foot distance, and a vast majority of the staff was definitely not comfortable with a 3-foot distance, which was a very important factor. And in regards to the K1 masking, again, I think there was a local condition at play there because of the nature of our schools, that we have K2 schools. It was going to be a very strange setup, I think, for our K2s to have our second graders wearing masks and not have the Ks and kindergartners and first graders having masks. So there was some flexibility based upon how it was going to be implemented in Westford. But I think all in all, we really had to take our guidance from the state about how to implement things, given a little bit of that flexibility. But I think it sounds like we're doing the same thing here, and we'll be doing that into the fall as well.
Carrie?
One of the other pieces that, were certainly a consideration was that anything that we were doing throughout the school year also mirrored what was happening in essentially every other setting where students and families were going. Whereas now it's not very typical where you would enter any place and a mask is absolutely required by all. And you're all aware that there was certainly conflicting levels of comfort one way or another. And while there was throughout the school year, there certainly is during the summer also. When we think about the summer population that we are servicing, while every student has their own unique needs that are being addressed, we also just want to consider the fact that the students who are receiving extended school year, in many cases, certainly not all cases, in many cases, the mask is really prohibiting in terms of the level of growth that students may need. So for example, some students who are needing some additional socialization, just facial expressions and smiles and all of those pieces when it comes to socializing, it's more difficult to do with masks. And certainly what we found out for really all students at the younger grades is when we're talking about some language development, having face coverings is also a limiting factor to progress. So thinking about the population that we're servicing, that was something else that has to be considered.
Alicia?
So it sounds like, at least from what I've read, the DESE and the CDC guidance right now line up sort of in the recommended but not required category. And And I know that we are all very practiced in that those recommendations can change on a dime and very last minute. However, I also know that parents like to know what's coming and they like to be able to prepare their kids. So do we have a sense of when the district will be communicating for the fall? Because I know that part of the concern over extended school year this year was parents feeling like they found out really late. So in order to be able to prepare for the fall, do you have a sense of when we'll be communicating to our families, this is what this will look like in our buildings in the fall?
That's an excellent question, and for that I was going to say there is a piece that I also apologize to everybody about not communicating the changes and expectations for any of our families who are participating in the ESY program in a way in which that they felt was effective. There have been discussions since before the school year ended where the commissioner was leading towards expecting that there would not be any masks in the fall. We would not need any masks in the fall. He did tend to say that he might make that change for the youngest learners, depending on where we were at with access to vaccines. But he has not officially said that. I am actually at a superintendent's conference this week. And so as you can imagine, it's something that everybody is curious about because all of the superintendents in the state are in the exact same position. So one of the things is I was planning at the very least, this is actually our first official meeting altogether. I was planning to send out, my official hello families, I'm the new guy letter in probably on August 1st, also welcoming people back. I'm going to be paying close attention to what information we can share with people as often as we can. And in that letter that I want to go out on the 1st of August, sorry for the people who were hoping to be surprised, that I will have all of the information that we have to date at that moment in time in terms of what do we expect school to look like. It might not be, if I don't have specifics, I'll be able to articulate why I don't have those specifics, and then when we might have that more information. But I think that while some families might feel like that is late, I would like to say in a typical year, we normally let people kind of enjoy July before we start thinking about the return to school in August. But that's the initial time frame that I was looking at. Dr. Cleary, do you remember any other information from the commissioner at this point? I just don't remember hearing anything more of a commitment as opposed to what we're going to be looking like in the fall.
Right. No, not at all. And I think that the new information that has come, I think probably shifted what he would have said. So you're right that he had mentioned probably no masks at all. And then he talked about the youngest learners. And I think even after that, he said absolutely no restrictions, period, whatsoever. Obviously, masks can be optional, but always had the caveat that may change. And I think with, the new variant coming closer to home, that is something that I would imagine will be revisited, maybe not changed, but definitely revisited. And we'll get more information this week at the conference.
And I did one last piece so that you're all aware. Our health director, Jeffrey Stevens, he and I have been in communication. He's been including me in all of the updates throughout the spring as well, too. And we've already been in communication since I took on the new role. And we're planning to have a sit down and come together with the town nurse, with Dr. Cleary, just even the four of us just initially, as we continue to make sure that we're paying attention to what the Westford information looks like. And then we'll continue to keep you in the loop and continue to, I think, look to see what if it indicates that we need to make any specific changes or if it doesn't.
Great, thank you. And you're right, this is our first official meeting. Oh, and we've got something from Catherine. But I was going to say thank you for joining us while you're at the conference on the Cape. Appreciate that. Catherine, go ahead.
just to bring it back to then the ESY, Dr. Cleary and Dr. Chu, are you happy with everything and how it's running so far with masks, no masks, and what guidelines and strategies are in place? You're happy with how everything is running so far there then, just for families to know?
I do think that the families and the students and the staff are doing a great job with all of the precautions in place. I think at heart, what we have is we have some families who feel very strongly one way and some families who feel very strongly another way. And so it's caused a little bit of conflict, I think, within the community a little bit. But I do think that the staff, we have a registered nurse, we have a licensed nurse as well, and the staff, they're doing a great job taking care of the students, and the students are, I think, doing a great job.
Awesome, thanks.
We do have a few members of the public here. I meant to say this earlier, but we didn't have a public comment section of the meeting. But if anyone has questions or comments on this agenda item in particular, you can raise your hand in Zoom and you can take the microphone. Otherwise, this was a good discussion. I'm glad we got to do this. Again, I think we've been doing this for so long with COVID that it's good to have this opportunity to talk these things out. I think we've gotten used to sort of discussing where we're at with things, and then we had meetings. We didn't have a break last summer from meetings, and so it was a little odd not to have a meeting when something COVID related changed. So this was actually really helpful. Committee, we have a retreat coming up. Is it next week already? Or is it 2 weeks? 2 weeks. Okay. Thank goodness July isn't flying that fast. So keep an eye out for more details about that and what that will entail. We'll be starting to kind of put that together and add some structure to that. So that's going to be a really good opportunity to come together as a committee with, new folks and new administrators and set the tone for the coming year, which I think is pretty exciting. It's going to be a good year. So otherwise, there's nothing else on the agenda. Do I have any motions?
Motion to adjourn.
That's the one. I'll second that. Okay. Valerie?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Catherine?
Aye.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for this special meeting of the school committee out of the blue, and appreciate it. And we'll see everybody soon. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.